And welcome to another episode of Pro Wrestling Society podcast. I'm gonna get into a couple of topics today. The first being there. There's been another alleged sexy star shoot fight between her and Diosa Quetzal. I can't pronounce her name, but I'll post a link to that below. Basically, this cameraman on Twitter said something about um, them having problems during the match, and then Diosa Quetzal throws a stiff kick, and Sexy no sells it, gets up and starts beating the crap out of her, cussing her out in Spanish, and then it pins her, and that was pretty much the gist of it. Now, this is ridiculous, honestly, because it's obvious that the media is trying to make her look worse than she actually is. I don't believe that. I mean, first of all, there's no reliable proof that they actually had um, beef with each other. It just, I mean, not at least not that I know of, and it it's just the cameraman's word against um, whomever, and so really we got nothing to go on um, unless somebody talks about it, or So that it's it's I think it's just the media's way. I mean, the wrestling community's way of pretty much trying to make her career shortened or and whatever. And honestly, um, I think I could be wrong, but I think that what happened uh, was um, her opponent Diosa Quetzal kicked her, and because she was bad mouthing her, I don't know, being uncooperative, and and even if it were true, even if Sexy Star was being uh as they say troublesome during the match, it still doesn't justify a stiff kick to the head, especially when said wrestler um, doesn't even consent to it. So I don't buy that story. I might be biased, but I don't care, honestly. And and yeah, that's pretty much my 2 cents on it. Um, okay, next one is Ronda Rousey transitioning from MMA to pro wrestling. Um, I'll post the link to the video footage below, but apparently, in the media, Ronda Rousey has been talking about, or at least hinting that she's going to the transition into pro wrestling, and namely probably WWE, and she's already training and and whatnot. And from the looks of it, from the footage that I saw, she looked uh, what she was doing was pretty good. It was pretty entertaining. Um, it was a pretty pretty kind of old school, if I may say so. Like, kind of, it reminded me much of the old WWE days, or at least the ruthless aggression period. Um, And so I'm wondering how good she'd be in a pro wrestling ring because uh, one being she's a MMA fighter, and two is that when she was in the UFC, she had a character going on, a buff gal type of fighting machine, aggressive powerhouse kind of character, and that's one of the reasons why I'm a fan of her because she has that demeanor of her, and that she doesn't play around. And I really would like to see her actually create a character like that in pro wrestling because I think she could do really well in the pro wrestling business. Um, I thought she could have done well in MMA in the UFC, but um, ever since she lost to Holly Holm, she just hasn't been the same since. So um, I don't know. I just expected her to come back with a lot of fire and a lot of payback, eh, and I expected her to step her game up, but that didn't really happen because she went up against Amanda Nunes and lost like in 40 seconds, and that was a big disappointment. And then I find out that she couldn't properly hit very well, uh, which was pretty embarrassing. Uh, but yeah, now I know why she's more suited for the ground fighting and grappling rather than striking. Um, Mainly because she couldn't really take a hit. Uh, she's never been hit ever since the start of her career, all except until like her match with Holly Holm. I mean, fight, same thing. Okay, but yeah. So I would really like to see her in pro wrestling because I think she's more suited for that type of environment. Um, Especially with her MMA background. And as far as her character goes and her promos, I don't. I think she. I mean, I've watched some of her uh, UFC interviews, and she's pretty good. Like she's delivered some hard burns towards guys like Mayweather and her female opponents. So that's why I think she would cut a pretty solid promo if she works hard on it and whatnot. As far as her motives for joining, I think it's because her career is in MMA or UFC is pretty much done. I mean, no one's really. I think after her loss against Holly Holm, her popularity went down, and unfortunately, and she doesn't really get the hype that she does anymore. So, probably trying to save her her status and fame by trying to make it in pro wrestling. Um, yeah, so that's pretty much my thoughts on that. Now I'm going to the this other topic I got, which is on pro wrestling veterans needing to change their gimmicks when they get old. See, I don't know if you noticed, but a lot of pro wrestlers, it seems, at least to me, it seems that when they get old, they never, from the time they start, um, you know, they become iconic and like they actually break into the wrestling business and fame and all that. To the time they get old, they're still the same. They still use the same gimmick. Um, like the Undertaker, for example, when he started getting famous when he wrestled as uh can't remember his his early days as the Western Mortician or something like that. Um, to the time where he retired, I can't remember that era. The time he retired, he was pretty much the same person almost, except for the American Big Evil gimmick. Um, but um, yeah, he made some tweaks here and there, but he was essentially the same person. And there's nothing particularly wrong with that, but I feel like creatively wrestlers should should more or less change their gimmicks when they get old to the point where they can no longer do the things that they used to do before, because I mean, for several reasons. It's a different generation. Like I remember back in the good old days, the golden era of WWE, WWF. Undertaker used to be the top dog. Used to, he used to have a lot of mysticism and character presence and all that stuff. He had a legacy throughout all those years, but ever since the PG era, nobody really recognized him uh, because it was a new generation of fans, and so he wasn't really that popular anymore because Vince and WWE ruined it. They just ruined his image when they made him lose against Brock Lesnar and everything. It just all went to hell. Um, so I think that it gets to a point where you gotta change your gimmick up, uh, because if we know you can't really, how do I say this? If we know you can't do the same things that you once did, then why try to maintain that image? I mean, it just it's not, it doesn't look good. Um like in his matches, in his later matches with Roman Reigns and with more recent stuff, he's huffing and puffing. He's not really uh he seems burnt out and everything. He's barely making it. Um, barely has what it just seems like age wore him down a lot. Um, so no disrespect to him though, but I felt like if he would have changed his gimmick up, um, then he wouldn't have looked the way he looked, as far as you know being weakened and all that, and but it's like, I guess the only wrestler I can think of who changed his gimmick was Raven. Because I remember him from when he was at ECW. He used to be he used to wear that the punk rock kind of attire, and be um, more of a a vengeful type character and whatnot. I mean, he still maintained that image throughout his career, but I think beginning at TNA, he changed it up because he was getting older. So he started wearing the black, the black face paint and the straight jacket and the kilt and 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 basically making his promos darker and basically appealing to a new generation of fans and redoing his image and his gimmick, and it really worked out. I really enjoyed it. Um, and the moves that he did were really creative, really sick, really brutal. Um, because he didn't have the physical capacity that he did when he was at ECW and WCW. So I thought um, wrestlers should do something similar to that. Um, but as far as I know, they don't do it because I don't know. It seems like they just want to stay the top dog forever until they drop and not pass the torch up to anybody. Um, 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 I don't know if Mick Foley did that. He changed his gimmick. He probably did it several times throughout his career. Um, Even though he was kind of flip flopping back and forth, um, in the WWE and uh, and maybe at TNA. I don't know, but yeah, I think that it gets to a point where you gotta you gotta change your image up, change your gimmick because you can't. I mean, a gimmick can only work for so long before it just doesn't work anymore because you're getting old and you're wearing down and same with and a new generation of fans. Times change basically. Um, so you need to basically spice up your wrestling career and create something that still works, um, but uh, it's got its own fresh new spin to it, if that makes sense. As far and then, oh yeah, and by the way, another wrestler that I could think of who changed his gimmick up was Sabu. He used to fly through tables and crap and do all this crazy stuff, and now uh, now that he's older, he's in the indies and he can't really do that much anymore. Um, so he came up with the fireball gimmick where he blows fireballs in his opponent's faces, and I thought that was really unique, despite not being able to do too much high flying stunts. Uh, Throwing fire is a way to compensate for that, and it's hella creative too, at least to me. And he's also got Super Genie by his side. So yeah, something like that could work too. And that's my opinion on it. Let me know what you think on all these topics. Um, like this video, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see y'all next week.